and welcome to SBN News. I'm Kendra, the Head of Community at SBN.
And I'm Scott, the Head of Marketing at SBN.
It's great to have you join us weekly to hear our roundup of what's happening in our global community, what's coming up to put in your diary, and to hear from the members that join us on this show to tell you a little bit more about their businesses and their global ambitions. Scott and I have spaces available this month to join us for a chat, so if you would like to take one of the hot seats on our show, get in touch. I also wanted to remind our global community that our sponsorship opportunity for our bi-weekly SBN podcast is now open. If you want to hear more about this, drop us a line or get in touch with our fabulous podcast host, Fraser Allen. Our podcast has 58 episodes now featuring some of the most influential leaders in Scotland who are top of their field, who have built global businesses or charities or compete at the peak of their sport and much more. I'm not going to name drop all 58 because that would take a lot of time today, but our latest one was with the inspiring Dame Laura Lee, CEO of Maggie's Centre. So if you're looking for a new podcast, search Scottish Business Network on Apple, SoundCloud, or whatever platform you use.
Thanks very much for that, Kim. Yeah, the podcast is great, and it's really down to the hard work of Fraser, so I highly recommend you guys check that out. But outside the podcast, there's been plenty of news around the week. Our US launch has continued picking up some traction with more features in Scotland and the US, especially after the Business in Burns success. In other news from us, we got to know a little bit more about our London relationship ambassador, Johnny Downey, and how he will be able to help Scottish companies expand into London. More detail can be found in the article that was published this morning. In times like these, one thing that we love to see is growing teams, and MBN Solutions is exactly that. They welcomed 3 new people on board this week, 2 in London and 1 here in Scotland. Elytra Group, who you may remember from last year when we interviewed their founder, Alan Graham, also grew their London presence with the appointment of a new business development executive. There was also some great member interviews this week, starting with Jacine Rutasikwa, speaking in drinks community, all about Matuga rum, surviving 2020, and her hopes to inspire more people from a BAME background to enter the drinks industry. Sylvia Baldock's Becoming More Significant podcast released its latest episode, this time interviewing entrepreneur, events expert, and a truly international Scot, Claire Alexander. There was some more members collaborating on podcasts though. Glenn Moyer learned how the Scottish diaspora engage in music, dance, song, and language as he interviewed the Association of Exiled Scots. Similar to ours, if you want to listen to any of those shows, you can find the links in the description of this video or search them into your favourite podcast player. Looking forward, there's some events that you can put in the diaries. We've got a couple of events on February 16th. Our Lunch and Learn series with Scotland House continues, this time with R. Michael Anderson, where he will be covering the 12 principles for reshaping how to lead in this new normal and beyond. The event is for SBN and Scotland House members only, but if you want to learn more about what Michael's going to talk about, he covers it extensively in his new book, which you can find in the description of this video. Later on the 16th, we have our Scottish Business Showcase, where we invite 3 Scottish business leaders to talk about their growing businesses and share their unique ask, which will help them continue to scale. Join us as we hear from Purist Gin, Future X, and Hay Summit, 3 Scottish organisations making a name for themselves. But speaking of making a name for themselves, we are hearing from someone today who knows a little bit about the power of a name, don't we, Kendra?
Yes, we're welcoming Harry McGrath, Chair and Head of Engagement and Global Outreach at Dot Scot Registry.
Morning,
Hello,
Kendra.
Harry.
Morning, all.
Hello.
You see me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great, thank you. Do you
Okay.
want to start by introducing yourself and telling us a bit more about Dot Scot?
Sure, yeah. Well, my name's Harry McGrath. I first got involved in Dot Scot when I returned to Canada, from Canada, to Scotland in 2007, after being over 20 years living in Canada. And my last gig there was running the Centre for Scottish Studies at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. So when I got back here, I got a little phone call telling me there was a group of motivated Scots looking to set up a digital identity for Scotland through a domain unique to Scotland. And they were looking for somebody who knew Scots and affinity Scots around the globe, which was me, I suppose, because I didn't just know thousands in Canada, but I'd been involved in New Zealand, Australia, work in various places. So I liked the sound of that. The only problem was that there was no such domain to apply for at the time. So we met and we researched and we asked people what they would think if this ever happened. But to be honest, we had nowhere that we could go with it back then. Then in 2009, we started to hear rumors that the internet was going to open up and they would accept applications for other domains beyond .com, .net, and all the traditional ones. And so at that point, we set up a not-for-profit company in anticipation of getting the opportunity to apply for dotScot at some point. And that finally happened in 2014, where we applied at great personal risk, frantically worried about everything. We had to raise the equivalent of 500,000 American dollars for the application and the various legal costs associated with it. And we were 3 or 4 ordinary Scottish people. So that was a real challenge, but by an incredible miracle, it got accepted and we had dotScot by 2014. The other thing I should probably say is that the application also required the endorsement of the Scottish government, a letter of non-objection from the UK government, letters from famous Scots like Sir Sean Connery and Scottish organizations all across the globe. So it was an entire package, really. But in 2014, we got dotScot and we've been off and running ever since.
Amazing story. And the last 6 years, you've really adapted your presence in the market. So what types of businesses should consider a dotScot domain, and what are the benefits that people have highlighted of having a dotScot domain as part of their online identity?
Well, our second customer, if you like, was the Scottish government. And at the time, what they were thinking was it would help them to stand out on a crowded internet. So if there were Scottish government.com, they felt it wouldn't get the same attention as what it became, which is ScotGov. And really, it's taking advantage of Scotland's good reputation around the world. It's the fact that you can get just about any domain you can think of, whereas with .com and the others are all taken already. But essentially, it's to identify yourself as in some way connected with Scotland and take advantage of the Scotland brand, which is largely in some ways thanks to you guys doing so well all over the place, and to make yourself stand out and be particularly associated with Scotland. The one thing I should probably also mention about the application was that the ICANN, the association that governs these things, wanted us to define a Scot very narrowly. So a Scot in their eyes would have been somebody in a kilt who attends a burn supper. Well, that would have been of no value to us whatsoever. So we had to fight that. And we eventually managed to work the word affinity into the remit, and that was accepted, which was slightly surprising because they're usually very narrow in their definitions. So it's not just being born in Scotland or having Scottish heritage, it's having a healthy Scottish affinity as well. So that really opened up our market, obviously, and all kinds of people, including when Glenn introduced us, or Scott introduced us earlier, he mentioned Glenn Moyer, who's very much a heritage and an affinity Scot and has been our global ambassador in the US for some years now. He's doing a fantastic job over there. So Glenn was a good example of the kind of people we were hoping we'd get involved in this, and it's very much worked out that way. You picked a good day to interview me because I discovered last night that the Dot Scot Registry had grown 29% year on year and from last year. So needless to say, we're really happy with that. And I think there's 3 factors there. I haven't had a chance to look at it really closely yet, but there's 3 quite obvious things. The one is, it's not the way we would have chosen to raise profile, but if you've been watching television for the last year or so and watching the First Minister's daily briefings, you'll have seen protect.scot, gov.scot, NHS-inform.scot. So that's, as I say, it's a kind of a sad, unfortunate way to raise profile, but it's difficult now for people to say they've never heard of us when we've been on television every single weekday and sometimes weekends too since last March. The second thing I think accounts for the good results is Brexit. Where I'm talking last night to our MD, he told me that a lot of the dotScots he's seeing coming in are to do with exporting and importing, with trade. And I think some of that is that Scotland has a lot of residual goodwill in Europe. And I think people are starting to realize that and want to identify themselves as particularly associated with Scotland. The second factor there is that all .eu domains were suspended for people. Unless you have an office in Europe, you can now no longer use .eu. And so there's been a fair number of people converting from .eu to .scot as a self-proclaimed Europe-friendly domain. And the third thing is you guys, SBN.scot. You've been taking this all over the place. And I'm keenly aware of that, and I maybe don't thank you often enough, but having SBN.scot out there all across the globe, promoting us both consciously and by implication, has been a super factor. And we've seen people, SBN members, coming in and registering dotScots, which is great. The other reasons I don't know yet, I'd have to look more closely now that when I get an opportunity to look at what's been happening. But in the month of January just past, we sold more dotScot domains than any time since January 2015, which was right at the beginning of our launch. So we had obviously huge interest at that point, and it's happening again. So really, really happy about all of that.
Amazing. Well, for us, it was a no-brainer, and it was easy to see that mutual benefit. It's become such a core part of our identity and brand, and it clearly showcases where we're from, and it aligns with our mission. And you're right, a lot of people ask us in the global community that we've created, where did you get that .scot domain? And it's associated with all of our events as well.
Yes.
So how do people go around and get a domain registered with .scot?
Well, there's two ways you can do it. You can go to our dotScot website, and all of the registrars are listed there. If you're price conscious, then it's a good idea to shop around, because the prices can be quite different. If you want a price that's guaranteed and good, then you can go to domains.scot, which are a sister company which specializes in .scot registrations, and it's very easy to search and register there.
Amazing, thank you. And in December, you announced India as your 53rd country to get a .scot domain with the appointment of your ambassador in India. So 53 countries is an amazing global triumph. Can you tell us a little bit more about your global ambition for this year and beyond, Harry?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, India first. Again, that's down to you, because I met Veer Singh Anand via our mutual membership of SBN. And if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have known him. So thanks for that. He's doing a great job already there, Veer. We've got global ambassadors in Australia, in America, in Canada, in New Zealand, in Europe. And so we're really building up on that side. The thing that really attracted me, or one of the things that really attracted me to dotScot in the first place, was that it's not tied to citizenship or geography, for obvious reasons, because there is no Scottish citizenship. So we had to find a different way of doing it. And the way we shaped it, or the way we envisioned it, was a domain for the worldwide community of Scots. And as mentioned earlier, with Scots defined as liberally as we were able to. And so that's been our vision from the beginning. And so India being the 51st country to have a dotScot presence was, as you say, amazing. We want to go further and further with that, not just with more countries, but building the presence bigger than it is. At the moment, the most dotScots outside of the UK are in Canada. And I think that goes back to the beginning because I knew so many Canadians, Canadian Scots of one kind or another, and were able to persuade them. And we've had some good media coverage in Canada. So if we can get everybody else up to the level of Canada, that would be really great for us. But at the same time, we're dotScots in very unusual places, Iran, Iraq, so places where you wouldn't necessarily expect dotScot to be. And we think we can do even more with that.
Amazing. Well, we're always delighted to support you in that ambition. And I'm sure our listeners globally, if you're an Affinity Scot and you feel like this would align with your brand and mission and you're interested, Harry's clearly laid out how you can get involved with dotScot. So thank you very much, Harry, for joining us today. And I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon.
Well, thank you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
And I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Morrison from AMBid.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here with SBN.
Brilliant. And I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, well, I'm the owner of a business that's called AMBid, and we're Scotland's largest bid and tender specialist. And I set up the business just over 6 years ago. So I'm currently serving as the business development director for AMBid.
Brilliant. Thank you for that introduction. So as you mentioned, you're the founder of AMBid. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the business and its journey.
Okay, well, my own background was that I'd worked in the public sector for 12 years. And I then moved into the private sector and to do with bidding and tendering. I led most of the bidding function at British Gas, but I wanted to actually develop my own business. And I wanted to start a business that could give perhaps smaller companies the benefits of these big company bid teams, but without having to pay for them, only to pay for them when they needed them. So I thought I'll set up a business that will come in as bid specialists to work alongside businesses and basically to help them to win more bids.
So as you mentioned, it's sort of 6 years now the journey's been, and I noticed you sort of announced the 6 years at the end of last year with reports that you've bounced back very effectively from the pandemic. And I was wondering, going forward, what the business has planned.
Yeah, well, we've got loads planned going forward. So just to say, the first 5 years of the business, I was leading the business. And at the end of 5 years, I'd sort of taken it to nearly £1 million turnover. We'd been profitable every year, not one penny of bad debt either. But the main thing was helping our clients and achieving 80% success rates for the bids that we're involved in. I then handed over the managing director role to David Gray, who I've worked with for many years as well, and sort of passed it on to a younger generation, let's say. And do you know what? It was a very sort of very interesting first year for David in the managing director role. October to February, our first 5 months of our financial year, we had actually increased by 30%. We'd moved into new offices and WeWork in George Square in Edinburgh, where you came to visit us there. And we were on a high. We're working across the UK and Ireland and overseas a bit as well, expanding our staff teams, winning awards. And then the pandemic struck. And you know what? We had a business that at that point was needing about 85,000 a month to break even. And we were comfortably achieving that. Yeah. But March, our revenues were down to 45,000. April, they were down to 24,000. So we had to make some really difficult decisions. We moved out of WeWork with the working at home thing, being enforced anyway. And maybe we'll go back there at some future point, but we had to switch to a sort of a remote working model. We had to lose some staff. We had to furlough some people as well. But the business did bounce back, and particularly from about August onwards, the business has been going great. So we ended our financial year at the end of September with, I think turnover was down about 17% across the year, but profits were actually up. We'd become a more profitable business. And we've had a great quarter, October to December. I think our revenues were up 2% on the same period last year, but our profitability was significantly increased as well because of cutting some of the higher fixed costs. And 2021 has been no different. We have got a great pipeline of work. I should say, by the way, the people we furloughed, they were all back within 4 to 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
We've actually got, we've taken on 2 new members of staff as well. And even the 4 people that we sadly had to let go, they've all found permanent jobs as well. So the situation's worked out well for them too.
Brilliant. Just before we move on to some of the things that you've been up to in the last 6 months, I wondered, the thing that always fascinates me about AM Bid and what my exposure to bidding has been is that there's so many little things that businesses can get involved in that they might think that they aren't suitable for. And I know you're always good for tips, and you often do a tips and trends for the coming year. And I wondered if you had any tips you could share.
Yeah, so I would say that you definitely have to get your message out there. You've got to be visible. We're in a world now very much of social media. We're in a world that it's not really a 9-to-5 world anymore. And particularly with the lockdown, we're all sitting with our phones and things, and we'll look at LinkedIn at all different, hours of the day and night sometimes. So I had, over a number of years been growing my network on LinkedIn. And Scottish Business Network have played a big part in that as well, because you've got some great events. I've met some great people through Scottish Business Network. But what I did was I applied for LinkedIn Live broadcasting rights. These are very difficult to get. There's very few people have got LinkedIn Live broadcasting rights. You've got to have a large LinkedIn following. You've got to be somebody who posts video on LinkedIn. You've got to have a lot of people watching the videos you post, and you've got to be a bit of an expert or have a bit of a message to share. So the first time that I applied, I was unsuccessful. And then a few months later, I applied again. And on the 30th of July, I did my first LinkedIn Live broadcast, sharing bid winning hints and tips, but also starting as well to interview people. And I've interviewed quite a number of people from Scottish Business Network, some of the overseas people that work with the network as well. And it was great to be on the Scottish International Week last autumn, and I did a LinkedIn Live interview every day, for the 5 days that was on. So I've now done 57 LinkedIn Live broadcasts, and loving them actually. And it's also a great opportunity for people to get their messages out there as well. Most of it's connected to work winning, because that's what I'm all about. Basically winning business, and we're going to have some exciting new developments as well within 2021, particularly for helping smaller businesses to really win more public sector work principally.
Brilliant. The LinkedIn Live thing I've loved, and one of the things I like about your sessions is that it's the variety of people that you've managed to speak to, and they're often quite open conversations. I just think it's maybe part of your interview technique. I was wondering if you've gained any insights from what you've been doing and the people you've spoken to, or any lessons you might have learned from them.
Yes, do you know what? I think particularly the work I've been doing with Scottish Business Network, speaking to Fraser Morrison in Singapore, speaking to Ian Houston in Washington, DC, and I've got other ones lined up over the next few months as well. I think I perhaps underestimated just how much appetite there is for companies overseas to be working with Scottish-based companies. There's a really good feeling about Scotland that some of the overseas countries have got. There are countries where you're pushing at an open door. America, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, some of the Far East countries like Singapore and others as well, where they've really got quite good feelings towards Scotland. And there are a lot of global Scots out there as well, Scots that have started businesses or working entrepreneurially, or maybe they're working in large organizations, but just as the Scottish Business Network identified, there was all these people in London that were wanting to do business with Scottish companies. It's actually the same overseas, and to some extent we're a bit limited by our own kind of feelings, and we might think, do you know what, I'm just this, or I'm just that, and the Americans, for example, have said to me, do you know what? There's going to be perhaps a better trade deal between the UK and the USA. So therefore, American companies will be interested in bidding for work, within the UK, and how better to do that than partner with, some UK bid experts. So that's opened my mind to think that there is a lot of potential work out there for us.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to steal that, pushing on an open door. I think I'll be taking that. So for anybody who's interested in learning more about Andrew or AIMBid, you'll be able to find details on the AIMBid website in the description of this video, as well as a link to Andrew on LinkedIn so you can catch some of his upcoming interviews. But for now, Andrew, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Scott. Cheers.
Perfect.
Thanks to today's guests, Harry and Andrew, for joining us on SBN News. As always, Scott and I are delighted to hear from you if you want to join us on the show. And also, our Business in Burns event that took place last week has the replays available for you to watch the content. So if you've got some free time, head over to businessinburns.scot to catch up on the replays.
Yep, and we've also got something we're working on all about the future of free trade agreements. That's going to be in partnership with the Department of International Trade. More details will be around soon, so watch this space. Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye.